Welcome to Dylan Experience. This is episode 29. I'm your host, Dylan Sessler. I'm excited to have a great guest for you today. My next guest comes from a family of veterans. He himself is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who served in Afghanistan. Now he operates as a local hike coordinator for Irreverent Warriors, an organization whose mission is to bring veterans together using humor and camaraderie to improve mental health and prevent suicide. He is using his position to serve veterans in his community. My guest today is Chris. Is it Kirwan?
Yes. Yep. That's
Perfect.
exactly right.
I get that right on the first try. Chris, how are you?
Good, Dylan. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So Chris, tell me a little bit about you. Like why, obviously you're doing Irreverent Warriors now, but why, how did you get there? What was your Marine Corps service like? Why is Irreverent Warriors a piece of your life after the Marine Corps?
Yeah. So, to give you some backstory, like you said in the bio, in the intro, I come from a family of Marines. Mom and dad are both Marines. And so when I joined the Marine Corps in 2011, quickly found myself wanting to do my best to get overseas, to get in Afghanistan, to be a part of the war effort. Did that, came home, and started to feel the effects of trying to reintegrate into society. I was reserve prior to my deployment and reserve after. And so being 1 foot in, 1 foot out all the time, and kind of having to flip that switch on and off so frequently made it more difficult than you probably would imagine for most reservists. The weekend warrior stuff it's all good fun, but there are some folks who really spend a lot of time on active duty or doing whether it's additional duties and things like that on the reserve side. And so I was kind of one of those people that volunteered for every bit of duty that I could. And so I was heavily involved in my local unit and knew a lot of the folks there, a lot of the Marines I was good friends with. And my first tout with suicide was in 2014. We lost one of those guys that everybody in the unit knows. He's kind of a jokester. You could always count on him to kind of break up the nuance and the hardship, whatever it was. He always kind of just had that personality that made things a lot easier for everybody. And so one of the last people you would have thought to have those thoughts and to have those temptations. And so, yeah, 2014, David West, we lost him, and then life went on. My responsibilities within the reserves unit grew. And then 2015, I experienced it again, and it was a lot harder the second time. John Burnell, who was one of my Marines when I was in Afghanistan, and same kind of situation, just another young guy, always had a smile on his face, always joking around, really lighthearted. Was never like a bad egg, anybody that deserved any kind of punishment or kind of got picked on or anything like that. Just not your typical candidate, I guess you would call it. But so after that, it really started to dawn on me that there was really something going on, and that was kind of my firsthand experience with veteran suicide. And then getting out in 2017 and trying to really just walk away from it, because I had a lot of back and forth about whether I wanted to get out. I was doing something that I felt like I was really good at. I had the respect of a lot of my peers. I was doing my job pretty well, and I had a lot of opportunities if I wanted to stay in and to progress, pick up staff sergeant and continue on in my career. And it just, the war was over. The Marine Corps was changing right in front of me. The youngest guys, they just seemed so different, and I just felt like I was losing what I had originally intended to be there for. And I felt like my time was up. And but it was still hard. And so trying to turn that off and just walk away from it and just say, I'm going to go and try and be normal, whatever that is. And so that experience was kind of strange and difficult. Ended up having a lot more questions of why. That's when the PTSD and the anxiety and the guilt, shame, all those other feelings started to settle in, probably about 2 or 3 years after I got out of the Marine Corps, and really lost that safety blanket that I feel like a lot of us had when we were in. And a lot of times it just, nothing really filled the void, whether it was, little Veterans Day things or stuff like that. Nothing really filled the void of what it felt like, hanging out with your friends in the barracks on a Friday night. And so I wanted to try and start something locally, and it was actually called Hunt for the 22. And it was a very flawed and failed attempt, basically, what Irreverent Warriors is succeeding at now. It was just a once a year 22-kilometer ruck, and our goal was to try and grow it into a community, but it's hard to get going, especially because I had my own obligations outside of that. So we did that for 3 years, and we learned a lot, and we made a lot of good connections within the community. But ultimately, I landed on Irreverent Warriors last year, and really just reached out to them to see if I could do my nonprofit any better, let them look at my strategy and what I'm doing. And they were basically just like, we're not territorial, but somebody might open a Greensboro chapter someday of Irreverent Warriors. Why not let it be you? And so that basically was it for me. I went to my first hike in Raleigh, and then another one in Pinehurst last year, and I was pretty much sold from there on. And the community that it's provided me, the sense of service that it's provided me, I'm a servant. I have a servant's heart. I like to help people. I like to engage with people and meet people at whatever point that they're at in life, and just be able to make them feel loved and appreciated. And so it's really filled the void that leaving the military has left for me.
Sure. It's interesting you talk about like the reserves, and I don't think this kind of gets enough attention, because I'm Wisconsin National Guard, so I still
Okay.
serve, and I'm still M-Day, so I'm still doing the weekend a month
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it's remarkably interesting to hear this from not just other National Guardsmen, but other kind of reservists from the Marine Corps and other, the Army Reserve as well. I've heard it too, is that flipping that switch on and off constantly, right?
Yeah.
Like that is, I think that, I don't think it can be overstated how difficult that is, especially when you kind of match that with the environment or an equal and opposite environment, especially like school, right? Like when you go to, a liberal school, and then you go to a very conservative organization like the military, and certainly there's liberals in the military, but it's a remarkably conservative place.
Yeah.
It just becomes it almost becomes a remarkably disconnecting thing in your life, right? Where you're emotionally exhausted from trying to match the conversation in each place, in each different kind of organization or environment. And so I really feel for you on that one. I still feel that at times, especially with what I do. But how do you think, how do you think, looking back, and obviously, like, we look back at our lives and we see there were good things and bad things that we went through. There were good habits we had, bad habits. How do you think, like, if you were to talk to Marines in the reserves or National Guard soldiers, what would you tell them to kind of work within that understanding of what you've been through, in terms of just the reserve part of trying to go back and forth between, flipping that light switch on and off, what would you tell people?
I think it's more effective for you to stay in the mindset of I am a member of the armed forces. Like, so for example, I got my haircut every single week of my life from 2011 to 2020. And the only reason why I don't get my haircut every week is because I can't get over there as often with my new job. And so that just a molecular example of just staying in the mindset, you know, being in constant communication with your troops, being in constant communication with your leadership, looking for opportunities to stay involved. Um, I'd say it's a lot easier to keep the switch flipped on than it is to try and appease, whether it's, you're at school and you have to kind of put on that face of, let me try not to offend anybody today. And I think it's a lot easier just to be who you desire to be as a member of the armed forces than to try and, take that switch and flip it off, because when you need it, you want it to be there.
Yeah.
Wait until you're out of the military to try and flip the switch off again, because staying vigilant, staying active, things like that, it's much easier to continue to do that than it is to try and, because I think as well on your drill weekends or whatever kind of movements, or if you get called in active service, it's going to take you too long to flip that switch back on. You need it ready to go. And so I constantly stayed in that state of vigilance and that mindset of I'm a Marine every single day of the week, whether I'm a reservist or not.
Yeah. Do you think it's sustainable?
It has to be. I mean, that's what we sign up for, right? I mean, it may not be healthy, but sustainable, sure. I think the other good part is creating healthy habits as well, creating healthy routines like exercising, good diet, meditation, whether like for me as a Christian, it's prayer, or for you, maybe it's just meditation on goals, achievements, things like that, looking inward for self perspective. Um, those things are going to help you stay even keeled, and they're going to help you in the long run with sustainability to be able to keep that mindset. But no, if you're just going and constantly putting out, you're eventually going to get drained and you're going to crash, and you might end up crashing really hard sometimes, to the extreme point, mentally you may end up having to step away from whatever it is you're doing. And being in the armed forces, you don't get that opportunity. When they call you, you answer.
Right.
And
right.
So recognizing how important you are to your respective organization, you need to take the time to be healthy mentally and physically, to stay physically fit, mentally fit, and be responsible for what essentially your government property, right? Be responsible for what the government has entrusted you to be. So from a sustainability perspective, you have to make sure that you're doing those things. And to be effective, I think it's important to do those things as well.
Mm-hmm. So when, you talked about those two suicides, was one before deployment, after deployment?
Yeah.
Is that how it worked?
No, both were active after.
Both were after?
13 was deployment, 14 was one, 15 was the other.
Okay. How do you think those kind of played into how you looked at Marines, how you looked at your leadership? How do you think those two situations kind of played into how you kind of perceive life? What was the difference between before and after?
I think I took a lot of things that were, so when I was at that point in my life, I met my now wife in 2012. And at the time I met her, I was super cocky young Marine, not humble at all. Would take any excuse to rub elbows with somebody or, pick a fight, whether it was physical or verbal. Um, just a really immature, person. And so point I'm getting at is I learned a lot about perspective in that time. Looking at, I never got to say goodbye to these two guys that I knew. And how quickly life can just expire. This is suicide, but, for somebody else, it was watching somebody die right in front of them in a combat zone. And that morning, you and them shared breakfast together. And so just understanding that the little things that we get so caught up on, whether it's in America or anywhere as a race of people, we get so caught up on little things and we totally miss the morality and the humanity of what's really important in our day-to-day lives. Finding ways to work together, finding ways to recognize our similarities instead of our differences, letting things go. For me, a lot of it too was I wasn't a Christian before my wife. I came to know Christ through her, and now I follow Christ. And a lot of that is involved with learning how to let things like that go. And so my faith and also my experiences taught me that it's really just important to not be so hung up on small things that are going to distract you from more important things in your life. I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, who they spend basically all day, every day, just being so upset, whether it's the, the left side or the right side of the table. They're so upset about what they're doing. And they talk to me about it, and I just don't really get involved in it. And they're like, how can you not be outraged? And it's like, but what can you do about it right now in this moment? It's taking up all your headspace, it's taking up all your cycles, and you don't have time to do the things that are important, like critical thinking about, what you're going to do for your family that day or what you're going to do for somebody else that day. So I'd rather fill my cycles with positive things that are going to allow me to do and impact people around me in a way that's helpful. And so it really changed my perspective about what's important in life, loving people, showing people appreciation, and working towards a common goal that can be beneficial for everybody. And then kind of just the ones that don't want to do that, who clearly just want to stir up and stir the pot, I just let them go. I've gotten really good at just letting people go.
Yeah. Let people make the decision for you.
Yeah.
Realistically. Yeah. So kind of give me more information on Irreverent Warriors. What is it that you do, one, for them? How can people kind of, one, get in contact with you? How can people kind of connect with you? How can people connect with the organization? Give us a little bit of information about that.
Yeah. So Irreverent Warriors, the way that it's designed is it's sort of like a chain of command, right? I mean, it's a military institution, so it's got to have a chain of command, right? So at the local level, every city is its own chapter. So Greensboro is a chapter. Where are you from?
Wisconsin.
Okay. I want to say Milwaukee has a chapter.
Yep.
So Milwaukee is its own chapter. They have their own hike. We have over 90 chapters, okay, worldwide. And so each one of those chapters has its own hike every single year, and each one has its own nucleus of a local hike coordinator, which is what I am. And then I have a team of people that help me put that hike together. I have sponsors, I have associates, things like that help me with the hike. And then every local coordinator has a district coordinator and a national coordinator, and then there's national staff. And so we have a very large group of resources in order to make these hikes successful. And these hikes are everything. They are the culminating event of the year. We also, throughout the year, we have socials, and, we're making a big push, especially this year, to recognize that we can't fight veteran suicide one day out of the year on hike day. We have to continually have opportunities to bring veterans together. So like in March, we're doing just a social. We're going to meet up at a local bar that we're going to hang out, play some cornhole, whatever. And
Nice.
then in April, we have a camping trip, and we'll continue to do stuff leading up to our hike in July and then afterwards. And so the Silkies are really important. And you
hold on one second before, because most of my following, I would imagine, don't have a clue what Silkies are. So if you don't mind, just explain that to people in your own words.
Yeah. So they are very short. They're very thin. In most cases, they come with a lining, like like your pair of swim trunks to keep your stuff all in there. And then and they are silky. They are the texture is silky. Okay, they're gentle. And so that's how they get called Silkies. And the reason why we wear them on active duty or reserves, whatever, a lot of times, especially early on in your training, whether it's boot camp, combat training, field training, anything like that, a lot of times you weren't wearing your regular boxer briefs. You were wearing some sort of PT short underneath your trousers. And for us, a lot of times it was Silkies because they're the most comfortable. And so a lot of times in our natural habitats, we're just walking around in Silkies. And like most people do when they get out of the military, they still do those quirky little things. I know people who just wear Silkies all the time. They don't wear underwear.
I do too.
Yeah. So that's what Silkies are. And people say, why Silkies? Well, because they're funny, they're creative, and they're different. They allow us to have an icebreaker for the community as we walk through town, as we walk through other people's community. They see us, it makes them laugh. And then they're curious what we're doing. And then we can hand them a card and say, oh, we're out here, we're bringing veterans together to fight veteran suicide. Oh, that's really neat. How do I find out more? How do I volunteer? How do I donate? So it's an icebreaker for us, and it's fun for us as well, because we can dress up, be silly, express ourselves, things like that. So, and then the humor and camaraderie piece and the irreverence piece. So the irreverence piece is really unique to us because we recognize that humor, and especially dark humor, take that for wherever it is, not necessarily crude humor, but just dark humor, as in like, taking a really serious situation and turning it into something funny that allows us to kind of
survive.
Yeah. And dilute the situation to make it seem not as bad as it is, when, like, in the middle of the night, when you find out that the 7 tons are not showing up and you're going to have to hike back to base.
Right.
And making jokes about it. Clearly that's not going to be a fun situation, but you tell a couple of jokes, you sing a couple songs, and all of a sudden it's a party. And that's kind of the way that we got through things. And everybody in the military experiences that.
Yeah.
And so, because at some point you're going to get, for us, it's the green weenie. Maybe for you guys, it's a different color weenie, but
same one.
Yeah.
Same one.
Everybody gets the weenie. So at some point, you're going to come across that dark humor that's really going to help you get through whatever the situation is. And so we also know the chemical effects that it has in the brain, and the fact that humor spreads quickly, and that we're able to, like I said, dilute situations with it. And so that is our irreverence. That's what makes us different. It allows us to take something as serious as veteran suicide and dilute the situation to a point of vulnerability that allows us to break down barriers and actually start a healing process. Not complete a healing process, but start a healing process.
Right.
Irreverent Warriors is not a professional organization that can give you professional services that you need like the VA can. But what we offer is a lot of people who are well connected within the community and are well connected within different veteran services organizations who can offer that kind of help. So I like to say that Irreverent Warriors is kind of like a glue between a lot of different VSOs to get veterans out of isolation, which we know isolation is the first step towards what it might end up being suicide. Get them out of isolation, give them some sort of something to look forward to, like a hike, and give them the opportunity to break free from whatever it is that they're going through, put them in a situation where people will love and accept them. And we just might be able to save that veteran's life.
Yeah.
And we have dozens of testimonies of that thing happening. I mean, I think of one off the top of my head, really cool guy named Lois who lives in New York. He's our social media director. He actually had a legitimate death day. He picked a day that he was going to kill himself. He started selling all his stuff. One of his friends invited him to a Irreverent Warriors hike. He thought, okay, I'll just go because I got nothing better to do. And he's still alive, you know? And so he's just one of many cases. And, you know, there's hundreds probably that we don't know their stories yet, but the same thing has probably happened. And so we know that it works because we know the science behind humor. We know the science behind recreational therapy, and we know the science behind community. So we know that not only are we doing something that's fun, we're doing something that is scientifically proven to help.
Right.
And so getting involved just means going to a hike, find a local chapter, or if you don't have one, start one. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree in business to start a local chapter of Irreverent Warriors. You can start one just by emailing info@irreverentwarriors.com and let them know that you're interested in starting a chapter, and we'll find a way for you to get involved.
That's pretty cool. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question? Yeah. Obviously, you know, you dealt with those two situations of suicide, and obviously you're doing Irreverent Warriors. Has suicide ever been a thought on your mind?
It hasn't, because I've seen the toll that it leaves behind. To think about possibly somebody else raising my daughter, somebody else being the footsteps that I should have been in. I can never do it. It's not to say that there haven't been situations in my life where, you know, somebody who maybe in a moment of weakness that could have happened, but it's just simply that I've created since experiencing, seeing it and hearing about it happening, I've created such a strong support network. There's a lot of people who check in on me.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm stronger than other people. It's because I'm willing to be vulnerable. Yeah. I'm willing to have accountability, and I'm willing to have people in my life to hit me around and say, you need to get it together. I have a lot of Christian brothers who understand and know my struggles. Not a lot of them are military, but I've given them permission to have that part of my life in their hands. And I think it's important. And that's another piece of the camaraderie that we really miss is, you know, I tell people that I have a very high standard for friendship. I have a very high standard for relationships, because at one point in my life, all of my friends I would have given my life for, and they would have done the same for me. And so for me to be on the civilian side and have people in my life who are just kind of nonchalant about their relationships, that was really hard for me to kind of make new friends that were just, you know, regular people, civilians. And so the only other place that I experience anything like that is within my church community. But, you know, being back with the Irreverent Warriors and really seeing that people are really invested in each other, not because they have to be, because they want to be. And half of them don't even, less than half, probably none of them really even know you, but they're willing to answer the phone call. They're willing to give you accountability. And so that's the other thing about Irreverent Warriors is everybody there is sold out for the cause. They're there for you and they mean it. And so, yeah, I've never approached that ledge, thankfully.
It's good. It's real good. Well, I mean, it's such a difficult topic to, dig into, and there's so many complicated ways you can get to that ledge. Um, I'm curious with, you mentioned PTSD earlier. How did you approach the healing process? How did you approach like coming home from Afghanistan? Obviously, there were things I'm sure that happened there that were a major struggle for you. How did you kind of decompress after deployment? What were the pathways to where you are now? And do you think
So,
here's a big question. Do you think you're healed, or do you think you're still in that process?
um, so I'll answer the last question first. The
Sure.
answer is no. Um, but the way that I got there really was coming back from Afghanistan and stepping into a college classroom 3 weeks later, like nothing had ever happened. Um,
Been there.
Never decompressed, never approached the seriousness and the impact that everything that we did there had on my life immediately. Um, just looking at it like I just, punched my paycheck, checked out, quit my job, and started another one. Um, and it took many years for me to actually recognize the impact. And then I think it was really after we got out of Afghanistan and looking at it and going, did we really do anything? Was my time really important? Did all those lives really matter?
Right.
And um, I started to unpack a lot of the experiences that I had. And, I actually, for many years, couldn't even tell you a lot about my deployment. I had buried it for so long because I just tried to move on. I just tried to be normal, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
And I tried to have a wife, a home, a steady job, try to fit in with my coworkers. I just buried it. And then it all really came crashing down about early 2020 when the isolation of COVID really set in. My wife eventually just said, you need to go get help. And that's when I reached out to the VA. I was completely unstable. Just, you never knew what type of person you were going to get with me. At one point, my wife told me she was walking on eggshells, and that really broke me, because I never would have imagined that I would have gotten to that point with, like I said, the amount of accountability that I have in my life, with what I proclaim in my faith about being kind, about loving my wife. My wife is my person. Like, there's nobody that I am more vulnerable with than my wife. And so to hear that from her really broke me. And so I was committed to getting help because, a lot of people sacrificed way more than I ever did or ever will so that we could have a life worth living. And, a lot of times I'll talk to people about, are you getting therapy? Are you doing this and that? And they're like, no, I'm fine. Well, did all of those people give their lives for us to be fine? I need to be great. I need to be great for my wife, and for my daughter, for everybody around me, because I owe it to people who sacrificed everything to be great. And so I'm not healed, but I'm willing to relive whatever it is that has broken me so that I can put out for my family, so I can put out for the veterans of my community. I tell people I was born and raised in this town. These are my veterans. and I will serve them, and I will continue to serve them for the rest of my life. And so I'm willing to continue to be, putting the pieces back together, knowing that I have the resources that I need. And it's not always easy, like showing up for therapy on every Friday for the last 12 weeks, and having to unpack and relive things that don't make sense to me anymore. Why am I acting the way that I am? Why do I perceive things this way? Why does this make me uncomfortable? This, your baselines are completely obliterated.
Right.
And so I think we need to normalize getting help. We need to normalize the fact that being just okay is not okay, that we deserve better as veterans.
Yeah.
And the resources are there for us to be better. We owe it to a lot of people to live prosperous lives. Why aren't we doing it? And when I say prosperous, that doesn't mean that you're the CEO of an organization. It means that you're giving back to your community. You're loving your neighbor. You're loving your spouse. You're loving your kids. You have a heart that is joyous. That's what I mean by prosperous. It's just, we deserve happiness, whatever way we can get it.
Yeah. It's certainly not an easy thing to achieve.
No, but we need to do it.
Right. When, you said, and again, like you tell me where you want to take this. If you don't want to talk about it, it's up to you. You talk about the VA, right? Obviously the VA is pretty, it's a controversial topic for some because there's bad experiences, there's good experiences, but it seems to be in many circles more bad experiences than good. How has your dealings with the VA gone? Is it helpful? Is it something like, what do you see in terms of, obviously you're getting therapy through the VA. What do you kind of notice about that situation?
So I would say that the VA's efforts I'd say that they're really doing their best. The issue a lot of times is, so backing up, I put in a claim when I first got home from Afghanistan. Things were really bad in 2000, the Obama era. He really did a lot of good stuff towards the end of his time there towards the VA. You remember that huge scandal where we found out that the VA was like canceling people's appointments on purpose and like making them reschedule. After all that stuff was ousted, there was like a total house cleaning. Yep. And things really started, and the community care network started to really expand. So in short, my first experience was bad. And I think that first experience is really what further drew me away from the thought of any kind of getting help. Me burying things a lot of times, I can look back and say it was because I felt like there wasn't really anything wrong with me because the VA said that there wasn't anything wrong with me. Yeah. And the people around me said that I was fine. So, I mean, that's really not a lot for me to say that the VA is wicked or anything like that. I mean, I'm just a small fish in that big pond. My scenario is not that bad. Right. But my recent experience has been very positive. And I'll tell you why. So it was hard to get in there to get my first rating, and that rating got me the ability to be able to handle some other stuff physically. So actually 2021 was like a complete makeover for me mentally and physically. I was able to get physical therapy for my body that I wasn't able to get previously because I had the rating. I didn't have a rating for any kinds of physical ailments, but I had a PTSD rating that allowed me to be able to get community care for physical therapy. And then after that, and simultaneously still being able to get the treatment, the mental treatment that I needed as well. So the hard thing is that for your extreme cases where people are, they a lot of times they wait too long, I think
Yeah.
is what I'm really trying to say is
Yeah.
you wait until you need it now, and that's just not how the VA works.
Right.
So when I talk to people about the VA and they say, "Yeah, I think I'm fine," you know, uh, you're fine today,
Right.
but give it another year because a lot of times that PTSD doesn't hit for years. And so, and then there's also a lot of theories about, well, if you have PTSD, the government's going to come for your guns one day. I've heard both sides of that story,
Yeah.
but in the end, I need the help. And so I'm not going to risk one thing just for whatever those liberties may or may not be true. Um, so there's that side of it. And then I think a lot of people don't trust the VA for whatever reason because they had one bad experience and that's basically all they're willing to tout with it. And it's also a very big and in a lot of cases unorganized as an organization. It depends on who handles your claim, how new they are to the organization. There's just
Right.
a lot of varies or it just varies a lot
Right.
from time to time. And so
A lot of depth.
yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have some people in the VA system who took care of me. But really it started with going to them and just saying I need some help, I need some therapy. um and they basically, I didn't really feel like I rated a PTSD um connection, but I was just like I need help. So um I ran with it and got the help, getting the help that I needed and still getting it. And so it's a wicked system, and there's a lot of people who I know a lot of people who are like, well, I don't want to take advantage of the system. I'm
Yeah.
okay, I don't need to take advantage of the system. I'm like, well, for every person that feels that way, there's a person who is taking advantage of the system. So it's like, just get what you feel like you need. And don't worry about how you feel right now. Like, I'm worried, I'm going after benefits because I think one day I'm going to need hearing aids, and I think one day I'm going to need a hip replacement, and I think one day I'm going to need knee surgery.
Yep.
And so it's like, we're fine right now, sure, but what happens in 20 years? Are you going to have them dig up your SGLIs to go try and find medical records from 30 years ago? Get it on there now, even if it's a 0%.
I think that was probably one of the biggest failings of the last 20 years is leadership kind of making it a known point to say, if you say anything in your post deployment processing, that you're going to stay behind, you're going to spend more time there, you're not going to be able to go home right away, and you're not going to be able, if you claim anything, it's just going to cause more problems for you. And realistically, this is now playing out in people saying, I'm fine, I don't want to mooch the system, I don't want to do any of this. Like, there's so many prolonged effects of what happened with that, and these were just E5s, E6s, E7s, just trying to be like, guys, do you want to go home or do you want to stay here for another 6, 10, year, whatever, just to solve a problem
Right.
that, realistically would have been great for them, but at the same time, they wouldn't have gotten to see their family. And so, it's, I think we're seeing kind of the long-term effects of that, what happened in deploy or after deployments, and we're seeing it now coming to a head in the VA. And it's kind of unfortunate because there are guys that absolutely could use the VA, could utilize the VA. I certainly know I could. I just don't feel like I have anything that I really need. Like I've gone through 2 ACL reconstructions, and I know I'll need them. When it comes down to the point of one, when I end my service, I know at some point my knees are not going to work anymore, and I'll need that. I'll definitely need hearing aids. I realized I went to sniper school last year, and almost didn't go because of hearing, of all things. And I started to realize last year that I'm probably going to be deaf when I get older, and that's an unfortunate thing. But you got to be able to respect the system. And I love how you put that. You're waiting too long. Like military, like we always wait too long. We always wait till the last minute to get all the things done, especially in the reserve. It's such a reserve thing to do because we only have 40 days a year to do everything that we have to do.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
But yeah, I mean, it's the VA is it's a service, and it's a service that is beneficial if you're willing to wait for it. But if you're in an emergency situation, it's probably not the place to go.
No.
It's tough. But what do you think about the culture right now in terms of like how veterans operate with PTSD? What do you think in terms of, because you're obviously seeing veterans probably more often than I do. I see soldiers, not veterans.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in the culture? What are people talking about in terms of PTSD? Is the conversation being more open about trauma, about PTSD, about their experiences in war? Or is it still kind of it's good to see you. I'm good, and we go for a hike, but you never really open up about things. Like what do you see?
That's an interesting question. I've actually never been asked that one before. I think from what I've seen firsthand, and I think I see a lot different because I'm willing to take that first step to take my borders down. And a lot of times that opens up borders for other people because they don't want to be the first one to admit that they have any kind of weakness. I'll be the first one to admit that I'm weak in many areas of my life, and I'm not ashamed of it. And so I think that there's a lot more people who want to talk about it, but a lot of issues with being the first one, with perception, and there's still that stigma. I don't know if you guys have this in the Army. I'm sure you do to some extent, but there's a big stigma in the Marine Corps where if you didn't deploy, you're, bottom of the barrel,
Yep.
Or if you did deploy, if you didn't get a combat action ribbon, you really didn't do anything at all. And so a lot of that stuff exists on active duty for sure. But a lot of times, especially with Irreverent Warriors and some other organizations that I see, like the Marine Corps League and stuff like that, none of that stuff really matters. The importance is being willing to meet together, to, keep each other accountable, to depend on one another. I think that is more important, with the Irreverent Warriors. Like I was down in Dallas for the national conference. And I mean, we're a Marine heavy organization because that's a lot of time. It was started by a Marine. And a lot of times I like to joke and say that only Marines are stupid enough to have fun by going out and walking for, extensive amount of time.
Yeah.
That's just a stupid thing that Marines would do.
Infantry.
And, yeah. So, when I was talking to people, I never knew what branch they were in. I never knew if they deployed. I never knew what their MOS was. It didn't matter. And so being in this organization and seeing just instinctively how well we break down those borders like they never existed it's really inspiring for me, because I kind of live in that world. Okay. I was a communications Marine. I deployed with a truck unit. I was not a truck driver, so I didn't really rate to even be there. I constantly had to basically scratch and crawl to be able to have the opportunities to do, the fun stuff. And then, we spent a lot of time training. I never was in a firefight. Every single time that we took contact, we had to keep driving because I was a logistics platoon and we were carrying millions of dollars of gear and equipment. And we didn't have the luxury of stopping to get in a fight with Haji Bob just because we had some sort of pride or some sort of debt to settle. And so, I didn't get a combat action ribbon. And so, I'm kind of in that situation where it's like, oh, well, you're a pogue. It's like, yeah, whatever. But, so I'm kind of right there on that border where it's like, I saw some stuff, but I didn't see everything. But nobody cares. Really in the end, nobody cares.
Right.
I always tell people that it's a privilege for me to be amongst warriors because truly there are some people within Irreverent Warriors and some people that are in my direct staff who laid some pipe back in the day. And one of my closest guys who's been with me from the start with Home for the 22, he was best friends with my brother growing up. His name's Sean Rees. He took 3 7.62 bullets back in Musa Kela in 2010. And he was kind of what I saw when I thought about PTSD. I was like, that's what PTSD looks like. I definitely don't have that. And so for the longest time, I was like, there's no way I have PTSD because it doesn't look like that.
Didn't realize there was a spectrum, huh?
Right. But the reality is that it looks different for everybody.
Sure does.
And so that's another stigma that we have to break through.
Yep.
And so I think there's an overwhelming definitive answer that people don't really care that much about what you did or didn't do. Veteran is so different because it's what you do after you get out. You're qualified to be a veteran because of what you did when you're in, but your status and your stigma and the respect that you gain is all about what you do when you get out. I know plenty of dudes who never saw combat, never deployed. All they were weekend warriors like me. But they're doing great things for the veteran community and nobody cares about any of that stuff because they wore a cloth that they were proud of and they never let themselves forget it. Those guys who are still back there making fun of you because you're a pogue and don't have any kind of experience, they're wasting their lives sitting at a bar getting drunk every day. So you tell me which one's better or which one's doing better things with their lives and which one accomplished more with what they did or didn't do. So I would say that we're really taking strides in the veteran community to really welcome and accept each other regardless of what happened and to be able to talk about PTSD. I mean, I know Vietnam veterans who talk with Iraq and Afghan and Gulf War veterans about PTSD and the similarities and differences. And at the end of the day, we're just able to meet on a common ground of being veterans who want to support each other. And I think that's what's most important for us.
Right.
Is finding that similarity.
Yeah. It's fundamental. It's just trying to show people that we all have something in common, and I've spent a lot of my time, my native platform of TikTok, trying to show that not only do veterans, have this claim of PTSD, but people, right? Like a lot of what I went through, I got PTSD before I even joined the military. I never even knew,
Sure.
And that's one of the things I try and help people understand is like veterans don't have a monopoly on this thing called PTSD. It's a real thing.
Or suicide.
Yeah. Or suicide. Absolutely. And so I try and bridge that gap between, civilians who have absolutely been through traumatic events that have PTSD and don't really even understand that they have these, these issues that veterans have as well, but that doesn't mean they can't have it, right? Like there's this primal need to compare traumas, right? Like apparently, just because this person has had more trauma than me, I can't have a problem.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense anymore. And I'm really glad that that conversation is being had a lot more, especially on social media. That's where I think it really kind of has began to shine a lot more. And, the benefits of social media, I think is really having conversations like that. But it's good to hear, because I'm not as involved in the veteran community as I'd like to be, just because I have so many other kind of responsibilities that I've taken on my way. But it's good to hear that there's people like you that are, stepping in and having those conversations, being willing to be vulnerable. It's pretty remarkable to see what you're doing. And question for you in terms of Irreverent Warriors, how many people do you deal with in terms of hikes per year? Like what's a normal kind of numbers for what you do?
So last year, I think we had 63 hikes and we impacted over 10,000 veterans.
And that's just your chapter?
That's Reverend Warriors as a whole.
As
So
a
our
whole,
chapter
okay.
is a startup. This is our first year with Reverend Warriors as a chapter. And so I've been called out by the Wilmington, North Carolina coordinator that if I don't get 150 by June, that I've got to get pied in the face at my hike. So my goal is at least 150. So Wilmington gets over 400. Gettysburg last year was over 400, or at least over 300. Some of the bigger hikes are like Key West, Wilmington, Oceanside, California. Definitely a lot of your, destination cities like Florida hikes, North Carolina hikes, New York City is a big crowd, stuff like that.
So not the polar vortex of Milwaukee.
I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna get you in contact with the girl that does our merchandise. Her name's Shelly,
Sure.
and she's from Milwaukee, and she's from Wisconsin. She'll be going to the Milwaukee hike. Yeah, you all should get out there.
Yeah, I know a guy that I don't think he runs anything, but he definitely goes to it. His name's Danny. He's on TikTok as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's invited me to a few. Just didn't. It always seems to be drill weekend or something like that. Whenever he invites me
Always
out there.
weekend.
I know. It's just like always the most inconvenient timing to have drill. That's when I have drill weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd love to get more involved, especially around here. It's always been something, it's hard because obviously I do so much civilian side, then I have drill, and then adding on, more stuff. It's you never have time. You just never have enough time. But well, Chris, I don't want to keep you all night. Let me close this out with the last question and give you some time off. So if there was a message you could leave the world, what would it be?
So I'll give you my Sunday school answer. I'll say, love God, love your neighbor. But I'd say other than that, it's stay in the fight. You're going to have a lot of ups and downs. Nothing is ever going to be perfect for you. Put good people around you who you can depend on and stay in the fight. Band arms with people who care about you, and be willing to be vulnerable with those around you, and have accountability, and just stay in the fight. Don't let it get the best of you. Tomorrow's a new day, all that good stuff, but stay in the fight.
Well said. Well said. Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming out, talking to me, sharing your story, talking about the vulnerable stuff we talked about tonight.
For sure.
Yeah. For everybody listening, make sure you follow the podcast on whatever platform you're following it on, and enjoy. We'll see you next time on the Dylan Experience. Boom. Too easy.